Before the sun even touched the horizon, footsteps dragged across the hardened dirt. No words were spoken. No one had the energy to speak. Every morning, before dawn, had fully broken. Enslaved workers were already trudging toward the endless cotton fields. Their bodies, exhausted from the previous day's labor, no bells rang, no alarms sounded, only the crack of the overseer's whip. Solomon Northup, a free man who was kidnapped and enslaved for 12 years, wrote in his memoir, "The day begins with the first dim streak of dawn and ends when the darkness sets in." But waking up wasn't a choice. At Louisiana's infamous woodland plantation, overseer John Bones fired his pistol at 4 a.m. sharp every single morning. The sound meant only one thing: work or suffer, no exceptions, no rest days, no humanity. The heat was unbearable. Temperatures soared over 100 degrees, turning the fields into a furnace. Sweat poured, thirst burned. But water, that was a privilege. Workers had to walk half a mile just to reach a single barrel of water. And some days, the overseers poured it onto the ground just to watch the thirsty suffer. Charles Ball, an enslaved man who later escaped, described it in his 1837 memoir. "We would watch the water disappear into the earth, while our throats burned with thirst. They made us beg for something as simple as a drink, and that was just the start of the day. Then came the cotton. Each worker had to pick 150 to 200 pounds daily. The quotas, impossible. But failing meant punishment. Mary Reynolds, who survived years of slavery, recalled in her 1930s interview, "Picking cotton was like a battle. Every handful was a fight, and your hands told the story of every battle. The plants weren't soft. Their thorny husks tore into skin. By midday, the fingers were bloody, raw, swollen. By nightfall, most couldn't even hold a spoon to eat. But no one cared, because to plantation owners, a dead worker was cheaper to replace than lost cotton. Cotton was white gold, and enslaved people, they were nothing more than machines, built for picking it. But machines don't complain, machines don't resist. In the cotton fields, silence was survival. Frederick Douglass, a man who escaped slavery, once said, "The whip does not just tear the skin, it breaks the spirit." Punishment was swift, immediate. Didn't pick fast enough? The whip. Didn't meet the quota? The whip. Took even a moment of rest? The whip. But these weren't just simple beatings. 50, 100, sometimes 200 lashes. Skin shredded, blood soaking the dirt beneath them. William Wells Brown, another enslaved man who later became an abolitionist, recalled, "After 50 lashes, my back was no longer skin, but a raw, bloody mess." At Louisiana's Myrtle's plantation, overseer James Ryder kept detailed records of his whipping techniques. He even soaked the whips in salt water to make the pain last longer, but even that was not the worst punishment. Those who tried to escape? Their Achilles tendons were severed. Those who got caught, they were branded with a hot iron. At Whitehall Plantation, runaway slaves had the letter R for runaway burned into their foreheads. There was no hiding from it. They were marked for life. But suffering didn't just come from the whip. It came from hunger, from exhaustion, from sickness. Frederick Douglass once wrote, "At night, the sound of coughing filled the slave quarters, a chorus of suffering that never seemed to end. Extreme heat, no water, poor diet, all of it made enslaved workers easy prey for disease, malaria, tuberculosis, dysentery." At Frogmore Plantation in Louisiana, 30% of all deaths were caused by infections from cotton cuts. Their bodies were literally breaking down. But when someone got sick, no doctors came, no medicine was given, and if they died, a new worker was brought in to replace them, like a tool, tossed aside. On some plantations, they even experimented with brutal medical treatments, bloodletting, mercury injections, hot tar poured onto open wounds. In 1853, Dr. Josiah Nott, a plantation physician, wrote, "A sick slave is of no value, but a strong one can fetch a good price. The solution, keep them working. If they perish, so be it." Even pregnant women were not spared. At Wessington Plantation, they were forced to pick cotton until the moment they gave birth. One former slave recalled, "She caught her baby, bit off the cord, wrapped it in her skirt, and kept picking." But the plantation owners didn't care. Because, as one Southern slaveholder reportedly said, "A dead slave is easily replaced, but a lost crop, that's real money lost." Running away wasn't just difficult, it was a crime punishable by death. Fugitives weren't just chased, they were hunted. Professional slave catchers were paid well to track them down, dead or alive. And their most terrifying weapon? Cuban bloodhounds. These dogs weren't trained to hunt deer, they were trained to hunt humans. Once a dog caught a scent, there was no escaping. It didn't matter how far they ran, how deep they hid. They were coming. The hunt never lasted long. The moment a runner was spotted, the chase was over. There was no mercy. At Belmont Plantation, those who tried to escape had their ears cut off. At Waverly Plantation, a woman was forced to watch her own child be sold away, just because she tried to run. At Whitehall Plantation, captured runaways had the letter R for runaway burned into their foreheads. There was no hiding it. Some never returned at all. Some were caught and hanged in front of the entire plantation, a warning to everyone else, and sometimes they didn't even wait to bring them back. They shot them on sight, or let the dogs tear them apart. Because to them, a dead runaway was a lesson to the rest, and the worst part? It worked. The overseers didn't need to say much. The message was clear. Don't even think about running. Because in the end, fear was the strongest chain of all. Slavery ended in 1865, but did the chains, or were they just replaced with something else? The law said they were free, but freedom was just a new prison. Many freedmen had nowhere to go, no money, no land, and no rights. And just like that, the system found a way to keep them enslaved. After emancipation, thousands of black men were arrested for minor offenses, loitering, vagrancy, even not having a job. And what happened to them? They were forced into labor under the convict lease system. The same fields they once worked as slaves, many were sent back to those same fields as prisoners. At Angola Prison, once a former plantation, inmates were still forced to pick cotton well into the 20th century. The whips were gone, but the system remained. Their backs may have healed from the whips, but the scars on their souls, those never faded. Even today, in places like Parchman Farm, a Mississippi prison built on a former plantation, inmates are still forced to pick cotton just like their ancestors. They lost their lives to the cotton fields. And now, the question remains, did America truly leave this past behind, or did it simply change the way it exists?